It's just after midnight, voting day officially over South Africa. The focus now moving to the announcement of the results. And it's in line with that the IEC has brought up the results from the first voting district. The ANC winning it by some, well, not winning, but in the lead at least, by some 11 votes, as you can see there on screen. I tried to read that to you, but one doesn't have the clearest view from where we are standing. But I'm sure on your screen you are able to get a better picture of just how the numbers are shaping up. The first result being announced in the early hours of what is now Thursday morning. We're going to keep you right across the story as it develops, but I want us to revisit some of the events earlier. We brought you reports coming out of the Eastern Cape where people had complained about being moved to a venue that wasn't officially an IEC voting venue. That's after tents had been blown away during a storm in that part of the country. That is just one of the problems. Of course, the biggest issue for the IEC tonight, in the early hours of Thursday, I should say, it is good morning now in South Africa, you'd know is the issue around the indelible ink. A lot of South Africans saying it washes off. Does that mean that people will be able to cast votes in different areas, vote twice essentially? The IEC confirming that at least 2 complaints have now been brought forward. We're going to bring in now political analyst Lukwana Mnguni, part of our team here, as we continue to bring you all the very latest from the National Results Operations Centre in the capital, Tshwane. And Lukwana, we've got a flyer for company, also clearly hoping to give us his analysis. As you sit here now in the early hours of Thursday, it's officially voting day is done. The focus now is on the results. The IEC, again, we've been saying, and one can't labour this enough, dealing with the problem of these fears of people having double voted because of indelible ink and lackluster, if you will, security measures at some of the voting stations. Do you think they've handled it well?
Well, I think some of the questions from the floor during that press conference weren't particularly handled too well. I mean, for example, the question on when exactly do you pick up the discrepancy that someone might have voted twice or thrice, because if there's a double voting problem, there probably is a triple voting problem. And it doesn't seem like the checks and balances that are inbuilt can pick up the problem at the point of occurrence. So now that becomes problematic, because then it must presuppose that each and every Section 24A form that gets filled in does get uploaded and captured before the votes are actually counted and put up on the screens. We're skeptical about that. If that is the case, and of course your zipper scanners, if they are not intended to actually pick up that you might have been zipped or scanned at a different place, that too already makes me skeptical. But I think by and large, those incidents, unless within the political landscape there are parties that have orchestrated a situation wherein people will double vote, I don't think it should be a problem. I think, honestly speaking, individuals, with all their honesty and the way in which they interact with the voting process, they want to vote once. It may be those who want to prove that the system is not intact enough. That's your low-hanging fruit. Very few people would want to do that, unless there's a political party that has hatched a plan to get people to double vote. Otherwise, for now, I don't see it as so vast a problem, but it does, of course, at just the level of the process and integrity of the process, if there is a potential loophole of that nature, cast a worry some point. But I don't think now it is as pervasive as we can say there is a crisis in the election system this time.
And without venturing into the field of fear-mongering, and you look at the number of people who were eligible to vote in this election, we're expecting some 26 million people to have taken part. The IEC saying only 2 cases of possible double voting have been reported. Apart from political motive, do you think this has the potential to be a big enough scandal to cast some sort of aspersion on the integrity of the vote as a whole?
It will only cast aspersions on the integrity of the voting at all if the IEC is not transparent enough. They need to say, Incident 1 was at place so and so. This is what happened, this is what we have done. Incident 2 was at place so this is what happened, this is what we have done. We can't talk in general terms. I mean, I can hear the commissioner making a bit of political statements. This is how far we've come, blah, blah. This is not what we are here for. We definitely know how far we've come. We know the integrity of the IEC. We know the good work that the IEC has done. We know the reputation of the IEC that has held over the last 25 years. What we are interested in is a detailed response and how each and every one of those glitches that are picked up have been resolved, and so that they do not mar the political process.
Just on resolution, one of the questions that came up today in that briefing with the IEC is around the timelines, the investigations into these two cases, how that would impact the announcement of the results, if at all. Mosotho Moepa doing his best to say, we always have exempted ballots or that sort of thing. Those are cast aside as we tally the final figures. But surely the political parties will be very interested to see timelines as far as these particular investigations are concerned.
Well, certainly, and the political parties would have those timelines, particularly because of the multi-party liaison committee that convenes as many times as it needs to at a time like this, particularly here at the Results Operations Center. They can convene every minute if they need to, as depending on the number of cases that need to be resolved, because all of those instances of disputes and objections need to be resolved to the satisfaction, one, of those who would have lodged those disputes and objections, but if they've gone to the multi-party liaison committee, to the satisfaction of all the members of that committee. I think really the turnaround time is important. What of course you usually get with big results is this instance of whether or not results are of material bearing to the broader results of the election's outcome. So it may as well be, you've seen this, let's make an example with the matric results. You've seen instances where matric results are declared and announced, yet there are certain schools that would still be under investigation, maybe for copying and all of that. It does happen when you are dealing with a huge quantum of figures, that you actually allow the process to go ahead, the announcement to happen, because if you are saying, maybe we've got 3 problematic voting districts, and they amount to 2,000 votes and in their entirety, what would be the material effect of that 2,000 to the overall results to be announced? And if the determination is that it wouldn't be, unless you are sitting with a party that is on the edge, and if it got 1,000 votes from those 2,000, it could gain a seat in parliament, then that becomes a problem. But by far and large, I think your cases that you are dealing with in the universe of millions and millions of voter counts might not be enough that you don't declare the results. And of course the IEC has given us an indication already that they want to be ready to declare those results by Saturday. So I think if that date were to be pushed any further, we would then know that there have been material effects of some of these glitches. That's the only possible indication that we are going to wait for at this stage.
Very quickly, because we are almost out of time. In fact, we are out of time, but I suppose the early outrage, not only from the political parties here, but the various South Africans who've taken to social media, for instance, to talk about this problem of possible double voting, speaks to how closely we guard our democracy.
No, of course, but I also think it talks to a wider problem that has been quite clear to me since the special vote started. Is just the way in which voting material is handled and the training that accompanies these elections. I think one of the questions here was asked, how thorough was the training process? And I think a lot of work needs to be put in that. And of course, the usual says, you've got in excess of 160,000 people that are working. We've got to find a way to train people properly. There are instances where you see people carrying ballot boxes in compromising positions. It might be that there's been no fraud. The question around elections is always that you are managing both the facts and the perceptions around the elections. And the training is important in that instance to ensure that everybody is running the same process as much as possible from voting station to voting station. And of course you get some explanations around the question of, is the mark indelible? Because I think this is at the core of this question. And in fact, that question was not responded to by the commissioner, to say, can you guarantee, because there are people here who can prove that this mark isn't indelible? And the commissioner was unwilling to comment on that, and I find that extremely troublesome, because as a colleague said, it can't be both. It can't be both indelible and not. It has to be one of the two.
Political analyst Lukwana Mnguni. Lukwana is part of our team here on ENCA as we continue to bring you all the very latest on elections 2019. The good news for the IEC is that the leaderboard is officially up. That's where we're going to be watching all the results as they trickle in here at the National Results Centre in Tshwane. But the bad news for the IEC is it's dealing with what could potentially develop into quite a scandal. The IEC confirming 2 incidents of possible double voting that it's now going to investigate. That question continuing to dog the Electoral Commission throughout the day today, and we'll bring you all the latest on that as and when we get it. But the full team standing by for you throughout the morning and well into the day today. Anli Hatting, my co-anchor, standing by here at our set here at the National Results Centre. Anli, over to you.